bait time at the pit, it were always something to look forward to. Maybe happened about 10 o'clock in the morning, and if you were lucky to have a good bait that your mum had put up, well, woe betide if you told her it were good, because you could guarantee you'd have that for the next 6 months. Well, coming from my family, bait, certainly when I first started, my father had been on liver sausage for, millions of years, and that's what my bait ended up being. Liver sausage sandwiches and a bottle of water in a Domestos bottle. Rinsed out, of course. Jam, that was always a favourite and all, or as Brian Holt used to call it, strawberry flavoured steak. And then you'd have French jam, which was limon curd. One thing about bait time, you'd all come back by and sit at the bait seat and have a bit of crack. Just for 20 minutes, that's all you ever got, 20 minutes, and quite often you'd work through bait. But it was the time to sit and talk stories, swap experiences, and sometimes tell tallish tales. So it's great to do the features, you know, the walking industrial history, but there's lots of little pieces of history that don't warrant a full feature, but they've got to fit in somewhere, and they're interesting. And these are the kind of stories you'd tell at bait time. So I'm going to call this little series Bait Time Banter, and I hope you enjoy it. Obviously I mightn't be in the location where the story comes from, but never mind, don't let that spoil a good story. Sorry about that. I don't think there's a bobble hat being invented yet that doesn't make the wearer look silly. In fact, I think it's mandatory. Rumours of my death have been grossly over-exaggerated. Now, wasn't that Alfred Nobel that said that? It was. But also the same could be said of Anne Livesey, aged 12, who lived at Ramsbottom Buildings in Waterfoot in 1886. I'll tell you more. On the 30th of November, Anne had gone down into Wilson's confectioners shop down in Waterfoot. After coming out of the shop, she carried on up Carr Lane and threw herself into the deep part of the brook. Now she was got out of the brook, but she was in a terrible state, and the newspaper of the 2nd of December reported that she died later that night. However, when you get to the 10th of December, we find that she's alive and well, and she's appearing in court. Why? I have one customer, you know, who thinks I make 100 grand a year at this. He has a massive house with big metal gates, iron gates, and a fountain in the garden. Makes you laugh, doesn't it? So what was Anne doing? What had actually happened? Well, Anne was 12 years old, and she was an orphan, really. She was living with her aunt, and that was a bit of a complicated family situation because her aunt had remarried, and there was a step family involved. And they were living at Ramsbottom Buildings at the bottom of Carr Lane, by the looks of things, if anybody can find out where Ramsbottom Buildings are. Anyway, this particular day, Anne had gone into Wilson's confectionery in Waterfoot, and she filled her apron full of sweets while she thought Mrs. Wilson weren't watching. But Mrs. Wilson did. She did watch, and she saw Anne fill her apron full of these toffees. They're about 2 penn'orth worth, but the paper said she filled her apron with them. On confronting Anne, she said, "Look, who are you? Where do you live? And if you tell me, it'll go no further if you promise that you won't do this again." So Anne promised, and true to her word, Mrs. Wilson let her off, and off went Anne out the shop. Tragically, Anne walked up Carr Lane to where the brook was, and at the deepest part she threw herself in. She tried to drown herself. Fortunately though, she was rescued and taken home, and a doctor was called, and even though the newspaper said that she died, obviously they were just presuming she was going to die, and they thought he'd get it in while he could, and she was obviously revived. Now, we don't know where Mum and Dad was. It looks like the dad wasn't on the scene. She had another auntie as well who wanted custody of Anne. So the whole situation ended up with Anne being taken to court, 12 years old. And there, it kind of all came out about her. The uncle said that, well, she was a little bit simple, really, and that she used to pinch pennies out the house. So there was obviously problems going on there, difficult situation with step families and so forth. Then the other auntie said that she wanted custody of Anne. Now, where she was living at the time, her uncle was getting, well, he had been getting 2 and 6 a week off the Haslingden Guardians for her, and that had been put up to 3 shillings. So he had a bit of an incentive to look after Anne. I'm not saying he didn't want to, but the other auntie said that she wanted to look after her and she would be treated better. But Anne said, well, I haven't had bad treatment where I am. Anyway, the upshot of it was that we don't know the upshot. The newspaper article ended by saying that Anne was going to be remanded in custody and could possibly be sent back to the workhouse. And there we leave the story of Anne Livesey, who died but lived to see another day. Anyway, that's the end of bait time.